Hey, Damian Mason here with a question before we hop into this episode of the Business of Agriculture. If you farm for a living, you employ a lot of amazing technology, from your inputs that you put into the soil to the tractor that you sit in, your combine, and the amazing data that it harvests. But has your soil analytics kept up technologically with everything else in your farming operation? I would venture to say that no, it is not. Sure, you check for your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your potassium, your micronutrients as well. But what about disease pressure? Do you know what diseases and what pests you're going to face next year? No, you don't. But you can now figure that out with Pattern Ag's predictive analytics. Think about it. They can tell you now with testing what the likelihood of facing nasty diseases, things like cyst nematode or sudden death syndrome, what the likelihood of you having this in your field. Then you know how to prepare, how to treat, and where to invest your money. It's using technology to make you bigger yields and therefore make you bigger money. Go to www.pattern.ag to learn more. They are pioneering the way in predictive agronomy. Well, greetings and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture. We're talking today about the run in agriculture. We're in about year 5 from my calendar, and we're going to find out if this thing is for real, how long it's going to last, how it might end, what we can expect in the year 2023. I've got the Chief Commodities Economist for StoneX, Arlan Suderman. You might know Arlan. I have been hearing about this guy from this guy, running across this guy. Sometimes I miss him at agricultural events where I know he's been and then I'm showing up. And then finally, here it was in February. I got to actually meet him face-to-face in Las Vegas, where I was a speaker for the StoneX Financial company at a big conference they had. And this guy comes walking up to my book table. I said, wait a minute, I know who you are. And I gotta be honest here, I was actually kind of I was a little humbled when you actually said you kind of knew who I was. I mean, kind of, sort of. So anyway, Arlan, thanks for being here.
It's my privilege to be here, Damian. It's great to be able to finally connect.
So also I spoke and you stood in the back, which I gotta say kind of reminds me of like a farmer at an auction. You stood in the back instead of sitting down, but you stood in the back, and then I came up and we talked to each other, and you said, we got a lot in common. Besides our good looks and smashing command of the principles of economics, presumably, you said you were raised in a very humble agricultural background on a dairy farm in Kansas, not like Indiana like me. And I think you might have even told me that you also got to share the corner of the parents' bedroom with your parents until you were about middle of the way through grade school like me.
Yeah, absolutely. My grandfather had the dairy. My father had a sheep farm, also cattle and some hogs. So it was a very varied livestock and crop farm. And we had very little to us, but we had to work for everything we had, but Dad's rows were always straighter than everyone else's rows. He always was a perfectionist in doing the job. And if a job's worth doing, it's worth doing right. I didn't always appreciate that at the time, but it taught me a lot about good work ethic.
Safe to assume you're a K-State guy, right?
Yeah, I am. Yes.
All right. So I led off with, is this real? How long it will last? What should we expect? And now you and I both know, and you're the one with the advanced degree, not me, but everybody and their sister that says, I took a class or two in agricultural economics, they usually come in, they start talking grain charts and talking about, well, we're going to see some moves. And I made a joke about that. I said, every speech that I give, I'm always at a session where there's a person to talk about the weather or the markets. And I said, here, I can give it to you like in 30 seconds. It's going to get wet and it's going to like be a scare. And there's going to be a question about whether we're going to have crops planted. And all of a sudden it's going to dry up and we're going to get everything planted. Everybody's going to be happy. And then about mid-July to late August, it's going to be really dry somewhere in the United States. There's going to be some crop scare. Oh my gosh. The weather's going to, all of a sudden it's going to be fine. There's your weather. Now on the markets, the markets are going to move with the weather, and then there are going to be a few reports. The funds are buying. Oh, we had a couple of big export orders. Anyway, it's not going to change all that much. But anyway, things are pretty damn good right now. How long is it going to last?
I start every presentation I give with a slide. I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and it's still true. Price is a function of supply and demand as modified by the flow of money. And what I have found over the years is, much to the frustration of both farmers and end users, the price on any one day almost has more to do with the flow of money, which has to do with outside markets than more so than it does the fundamentals that we see. Now, a little bit of background, I tend to be a glass half full type of a guy. I'm an optimist regarding agriculture. I think there's always going to be opportunities in the industry that feeds the world. Sometimes we have to work at it harder than other times. Sometimes it just comes in our lap. And we've seen some of those years lately when it just kind of fell in our lap. We did nothing and everything turned up roses. I think we're going to have more challenges as we go forward, but the opportunities are going to be there. We're going to have to focus on maintaining the equity in our operations and building on that equity and taking steps to mitigate the risk to that equity. But overall, I think those opportunities are going to be there. We're going to be in a world that has more geopolitical risks. Some of those are going to be good for prices. Some of those are going to be negative. And some of those will be driven by headlines that drive these algo computers who can make up the bulk of the trade volume on a day-to-day basis into making mass buy orders. Some of them are going to be sell orders. The geopolitical risks in the Black Sea tend to be more supportive. The geopolitical risk tied to China are more of a risk to our prices. But I do think that as an industry, we are continuing to come up with new uses for our crops. That is, if we lose demand in one area and we take a period of time when prices break from that, that just stimulates demand and finding new uses for that crop. We did it with ethanol. We did it with biodiesel. Now we're doing it with renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel. Those are going to be some of the bright promises going forward. We're seeing that industry really grow. Renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel. Sustainable aviation fuel, frankly, I think is going to be part of what really keeps a positive outlook for the ethanol industry now that it's been named as a feedstock for that. So I'm an optimist.
You're getting ahead of me here, but I'll go ahead where you're taking me. We'll get back to the cycles and we'll get back to some of your other things. And I want to get a little historic, but let's go ahead and go where you took me right to. You're more of a glass half full than I am in some regards. Not because I enjoy being negative or pessimistic about this industry, but because I see a little more fright and fear than you probably do. I'm pretty anti-China. I released a whole podcast about why we cannot, we've allowed ourselves to be lulled into a sense of complacency in terms of agriculture in particular with China. They do not want to be our customer. They seek to be our replacement. And they also seek to circumvent us through development, colonialism, if you will, economic as it is, by going and exploiting the resources from other, mostly third world type countries. But here's the thing. You just talked about the ethanol, and you said very smartly that it increased demand for our products that might have otherwise not as much demand. And I've pointed out, sometimes the people in Iowa don't like to hear this, that ethanol was as a manufactured demand for a product we frankly have too much of, corn. That's why we take 37% of our corn and put it in our gas tanks. Were it not for the renewable fuel standard now in its 20th year, we would have 37% more corn than we really need, and therefore prices would be pretty damn low. Now we're doing the same thing with soybeans. Respond. And by the way, when I say we're doing the same with soybeans, it's not a renewable fuel standard yet, but it looks like that's what's coming through the EPA to make soybeans into renewable diesel, I should say.
Yeah. And as we look at the corn, you have to give credit back for what comes out besides the ethanol. If you look at the DDGs that come out, the corn oil that comes out, many of the other products that come out and get utilized in our livestock production. Now,
it's not okay. If we take 37% of the corn and it doesn't go there and all of it goes away, but also not all of it comes back. So we're extracting all of the carbohydrates to become ethanol. So it's like, if you figure corn's 80% energy, I'm thinking it's about 20% of the 37% that comes back, which again is only like 7%. So it is fair to say that some of it comes back as animal feed, but it's also a pretty paltry percentage.
Yeah, everything in it is used for one thing or other. The starches, which is the bulk of the corn kernel, goes to the ethanol. and the rest of it goes into other products, be it human or animal food. Versus ryegrass, making up ryegrass for ethanol, it's entirely going to go to ethanol off of that land, and that's it. So this is not the point to necessarily to debate whether we should be burning corn for ethanol or something like that, but it is today what is happening. We do have an ethanol industry, and livestock producers say, you've raised the cost of feed for me, but in the process, we've also raised the cost of livestock. And I guess the consumer would say you've raised the cost of meat as well. So it's part of the growth of the economy. And, there are ramifications, some of them positive, some of them negative across the way. You are absolutely right on the challenges with China, and we could spend a great deal of time here talking about the risk, as I do in my commentary almost every day, talk about the risks that are coming with China and what is happening. And even in my presentations, I detail out what's happening. And in the last month, a tremendous amount of things have happened to raise China as a risk. And that's why I am excited about the renewable diesel and sustainable aviation demand for soy oil and canola oil and the edible oils that we have, because we need to be more dependent upon other customers than China.
Okay, so answer me this, Arlan.
Yes.
China, we've gone, and I'm going to get to the numbers in a minute, we've gone up hugely on soybean production in the United States, predominantly in the last 20 years, which coincides or correlates, depending on which word you prefer to use, completely with the rise of the Chinese economy and therefore the Chinese consumer eating more meat, which then needs more soybean meal to make pork. That's just for the person that doesn't understand why I'm taking that correlation. But the thing is, we get into a pissing match with them, which they certainly are with us. They're the ones that are flying spy balloons over Montana and threatening to bomb and take over Taiwan and then cut off our access to semiconductors, et cetera. Then we're going to have a whole bunch of soybeans with nowhere to go. That's the idea. Okay. Right. And so you'd say, okay, my numbers are about half of our soybean exports go to China. So China's 18% of all of our export dollar value, all ag exports. 18% of our ag exports go straight to China, and a bunch of that is soybeans. It's about 50% of the soybeans we produce. Is the EPA and the federal government just creating a new demand source with renewable diesel, knowing that China goes away? Is it really, honestly, is it almost like that implicit?
I don't think the EPA and USDA are smart enough to do that.
Hey, by the way, don't you have buddies in the USDA and you're saying that about them?
I was on a panel with somebody from USDA Foreign Ag Service here last year, and I was talking on the subject in the green room before we went on, and he goes, Arlan, China cannot get away with not trading with us. And I said, really? You realize that Brazil's increase in soybean production this year is expected to be 27 million metric tons? And do you know what we sent to China last year? 27 million or 30 million metric tons. Yeah. So yes, they can.
Brazil's going to bring as many soybeans online in 1 year's increase as we sent to them. But I very much appreciate you saying that, because you say this to some of these people that unfortunately, oh God, I hate to do this. Rush Limbaugh, love him or hate him, he did have some funny terms. He called people low information voters. And he talked about people that tuned into what might be like the Today Show and thought that was actual data or news. Dare I say that if all you got was the USDA line on RFD TV, dear God, you would not have very good information, because it's all rah, hoopla, and horse shit. And you're like, that's not real numbers sometimes. Oh, China can't even live. They'll starve without the United States. I'm like, are you high? My reading tells me that Brazil could plow up an extra 90 million acres over the next decade and put it into soybean production. You know how many acres of soybeans we have in the United States? About 89 million. Same thing as you're saying. Am I right?
Well, let's put it in perspective. This usually gets people's attention when I say this. if you were to take all the brush land that is available to be cropped in Brazil and developed for cropland without touching the rainforest, it would be equal to the Great Plains of the United States, stretching from the Canadian border to the Gulf Coast.
Yeah.
Now, they've got a lot of land resources there. Their main problem has been the lack of infrastructure and corruption in the government, which has prevented that infrastructure from getting developed.
And by the way, there's that corruption under what's just happened this last fall, and a election, shall we say, that looks could be shady, and a person that was the former leader that was in prison that's now the leader again. That corruption doesn't look to go away. Plus, they lean very, very hard socialistic, which probably bodes well for a relationship with China, except that also it becomes too corrupt to actually work. That might be an issue for Brazil, right?
Yeah, China, in fact, has pulled out of some projects previously. Now they're coming back, and because of the corruption, now they're coming back in and doing some more work with Brazil and trying to strengthen that ties, because now China needs Brazil in order to get away from depending on the United States. And so they're really strengthening that relationship via the BRIC nations. You know, there was quite a meeting that took place with leaders of the BRIC nations the last week of June. That got very little focus and attention, but that was really the turning point of China being able to move away from dependency upon the United States, set up its own banking system for clearing deals based on the yuan, and they've already started to utilize that system. And a lot of changes have taken place since then, coming out of that meeting, to even pull in the Arab nations, Saudi Arabia, et cetera, not into BRIC yet. But the strategy has been very direct and purposeful in trying to move away from the United States, ultimately to take away the power that the United States has and the influence the United States has, and to be able to take our role as number one in the world, militarily and economically.
By the way, that whole effort got almost like a shot of steroids just in the last 60 days. And it seems like a lot of people, the same people that must get all their information from USDA, probably also don't realize that China's been eating our lunch the last 60 days. Hey, real quickly, Arlan, I want to remind our listeners, if you are in the business of agriculture and you need answers, you probably are spending a great deal of your time searching. I want to help you out here, especially if you're in production agriculture. There's a site. It's actually not a site. It's an application, which put on your phone. It's free of charge. It's an app. It's called AgVisor Pro. AgVisor Pro. My buddy Rob Syke, Alberta agricultural guy, entrepreneurial guy. He started 16 companies, and a friend of mine, he looked around a year or two ago and said, you know what? Any way you can shorten time and distance, if you can shorten time, if you can squeeze time and distance, you can make more money and be more efficient. So you know what? He said, why, if you are in agriculture or you spend so much time looking for answers, worse yet, you're going on ag Twitter, so you can be ridiculed by some dumbass that's driving around his tractor and wants to pick on you. Don't do it. Go to AgVisor Pro. You can create a profile there. You can then get questions to your answers. If you say, I want to know how to eradicate ragweed in my fields, there's going to be somebody that is an eradication of ragweed expert. You can find that person. You might even engage their services and pay them a consulting fee if you really have a big job for them. You yourself can become an expert on AgVisor Pro. Go to AgVisor Pro. It's on your phone. Pull your phone out. You got it in your pocket right now. Wait, don't do it right now. You're listening to me. Do it when you're done listening to Arlan Suderman. After you get done talking to him and listening to our beautiful podcast, take out your phone, put in AgVisor Pro, put the app on your phone. All right. Arlan, you and I agree too much, and I think that we're probably never going to be invited to the USDA roundtable. My brother, fair disclosure, is a USDA employee, and he's a sharp dude, except for he has horses. But anyway, this thing on a USDA economist telling you that somehow China could never live without us, it's not just ignorant to say that, it's also dangerous, because if we have a USDA that thinks that way and is still out here running around the countryside telling our farmers, this is harkens back to, Butts telling everybody the world can't live without us. Fence row to fence row, boys. Plant all the crops you can. And then the next thing you know, the 80s came along, because it turns out there were other suppliers of crops. Are we that, shall I say, unclairvoyant at the USDA?
Well, when your livelihood depends on simply showing up for work and not productivity, so to speak. I used to work for USDA in an extension job, And one reason I'm no longer there, and I loved working extension, working with farmers and helping them, but the frustration to me was the adage, I'm here from the government, I'm here to help you. I felt like the system held me back from being efficient and productive. And that's why I broke away from government, so that I could be more productive in helping farmers. That's been the driving force of my whole career over the last 40 years.
By the way, not only are you not going to make any fans probably at over USDA, but I like that. I like that whole analysis of why you went on your own. Someone asked me why I quit my job. I've been asked this a number of times. I quit my job almost 30 years ago now, 29 and some odd years ago. And I said I wanted to be more creative and I wanted to be in charge of my compensation. I didn't think working for some organization that could happen. So see, it's good. We both know what drives us. Answer me this then. You and I both know that China can live without us and intends to do so. You never answered the question. Do you think that we're inventing this? And okay, and you said USDA and EPA aren't smart enough to look out and see this.
Yeah.
But are we, meaning there are, let's be honest here, there are string pullers that might be in charge of some of the policy that gets developed that are not within the government organizations. Maybe they are from outside of government organizations, and it turns out they have influence. Are the influencers, and I'm not talking about Instagram influencers, are those who actually get things done, making it happen so that we will simply fill the demand that we lose from China with biofuel, real renewable diesel? Is that what you think is happening? Or is it just somehow coincidental?
Oh, there's a lot of different forces at work. Some of it's the producer organizations and the checkoff dollars that are doing the work. Some of it's the ingenuity of American invention. We work the entire spectrum of the renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel side, all the way working with the producers, to working with processors, to working with the airlines who consume the sustainable aviation fuel.
Yeah, I've had a guy on here. I've had a guy on renewable diesel. His name is Pete Meyer. He's he's an analyst on the entire thing. I can't remember the company he's with. You might know him. And his whole thing was about the sustainable aviation fuel. You get the United Airlines behind it, and when United Airlines or American or one of the bigs is behind it, it's probably got some lift off. Pun intended. Okay. You didn't think you'd have this much fun on here now, did you?
But when you get an airline that flies into Europe, and Europe, which is moving green at a faster pace than maybe just about any other region of the world, says if you're going to continue to fly into our airspace, you're going to have X% of your fuel, depending on the year it is, be of green fuel. Then people start to find ways to create that. And industry starts to do that. And they find that one of the sources is the edible oils that are being produced out there. And an industry emerges to do that. And that's what we're seeing happen. And so it's a combination of factors. And our grower groups say, hey, we can be part of that too. They're jumping on there. But it's a combination of a need being created by the green movement. You can say whether that's good or bad, but it's happened. And so people are saying, okay, if you're going to have that demand, then we think we have a way to fill it. And ag groups are saying, okay, we have the feedstock you can make that with. And that's what's driving it.
I prefer to call it green crusade versus green movement. It puts it more in perspective as to what it is. And also the green crusaders that are carrying the signs and showing up with their petitions aren't really, they're useful idiots, as Lenin called them. The actual strings are being pulled by an industry that's going to profit from this stuff, is my take on it. And that's fine. Ag's going to make profit on it also. So here's the thing. We are going to get bailed out. And I'm not talking about from the government, but we're going to get bailed out kind of from the government, because they're going to say, okay, we think we're going to make this EPA standard. Certain amounts of diesel fuel have to be soy-based or bio-based, which soy is one of the leading contenders because it's our biggest oil seed produced in North America. Canola is probably number 2, right?
Right.
Mostly out of the prairie provinces. But we're going to get bailed out because all of a sudden we're going to find demand for it. And it's going to it's going to be that Pavlov's dog thing. Every time the agricultural producer in North America makes more stuff, we come up with new policies to figure out how to burn through more stuff. My research tells me we're going to be pushing 90 million acres of soybeans this year. We were only at about 60 million 40 years ago. We've 50% increased our acres of soybeans. And not to mention, each year we go up in yield by 0.8 of a bushel, about 1 bushel
Roughly,
more per
yep.
year.
Mm-hmm.
We just keep producing the hell out of soybeans. And it's never been a thing of, hey, stop doing that because the global marketplace has enough soybeans. It's instead, well, we made this stuff, better figure out how to burn it. And that's what we're doing. Is there a moral hazard there?
You know, and you're old enough to remember as well the days when we were going to starve the world. Because we weren't going to be able to feed everybody and we were going to have mass starvation. And we do have starvation in parts of the world, but most of it's not because we don't produce enough. It's because of political corruption.
Distributive
Exactly.
economics and or corruption and or food being used as a weapon or a political toy.
Exactly.
Tool, right?
Yeah, exactly right. We do produce enough and we have the capability to produce enough. And we continue to do that. And so I guess it's the ingenuity of mankind to come up with needs and fill needs when needed and find creative ways of doing that. And we continue to do it. And I guess that's one reason I'm so optimistic about U.S. agriculture. But keep in mind, we also have about, 23 million acres now in conservation programs that aren't even being farmed. So we're shifting those acres to South America. I mean, if all those acres were farmed, minus the really highly erodible that shouldn't be, we'd have lower prices. We'd be producing
funny you bring that up. My nephew just texted me this morning. He's a military guy. I think he's a little concerned that we're going to not have enough agricultural resource. And he's heard me talk about ag being a means of national security. And he was afraid it's because the government was paying farmers not to farm. And I said, if you're talking about the CRP program, I said, I think it's around 30 million acres. You just corrected me. You're saying it's about 23? Okay.
Yeah.
So I was heavy by roughly 10 to 15%. I said it was around 30 million acres. And I said, don't sweat it. Most of that shit shouldn't have been farmed anyhow.
Yeah, I was in extension in western Kansas when the program was first initiated and put a lot of that ground and never should have been farmed back into grassland. And that was the good part of it.
Yeah. So I would say if it was 10% or 12 or 13% of our cropland, it couldn't have been even half that in way of our productive capacity.
Right.
Because you're talking about, I've seen some CRP ground, Arlan, in the deserty part of Oregon, where you've been, I'm sure, Moro, Oregon, where they grow some wheat, but they also had some fields. And they said, that's CRP. I said, CRP? I said, it just looks like a cliff. And they said, yeah, that's why we're not farming anymore. I said, you're farming stuff that shouldn't be farmed. You're still farming stuff that's got a 35% slope on it. You get 9 inches of precipitation. Why even bothering?
Yeah, exactly right. So there's some good to those programs.
But anyway, we've increased. So here's a funny that someone's going to say, because I remember I get a lot of different listeners. They're going to say, Damian, you just told me you 50%ed the acres of soybeans. And what if I told you we've also about 50% of the acres of corn in the last 50 years? That's a rough number, isn't it, Arlan?
Yeah, and the biggest crop we've lost from is wheat.
Yeah. We're about 47 million acres of wheat, and we were damn near double that at one point.
Yeah, we're moving that overseas, basically. Wheat can be grown just about anywhere in the world, and there's only so many areas of the world that are really conducive to growing corn and soybeans. And wheat, we always say, is kind of like a weed. It can grow a lot of different places. And so why not let some of these other areas grow that? And we'll focus on some of the other crops that we have the soils to really make better use out of them.
And the moisture, which brings me to my next thing. If we continue to use policy, say renewable diesel fuel policies to require it, et cetera, some acres they're not quite CRP worthy, but they require a lot of love in way of water. We started seeing it this year. Everywhere west of the Mississippi got pretty dry. Mm-hmm. I've said that we're going to start seeing an economics of water come into play. Arlan, Are we going to see acres revert in the western Nebraska, western Kansas, and the western plains and the panhandle of Texas, where the Ogallala Aquifer is done give what it could give? And it's been a story since I was a little boy and picked up National Geographic and read about the depletion of the aquifers. Are we going to see acres in that? Maybe they don't go to CRP, but they just go to rangeland?
Well, it may go to sorghum, which is more of a drought tolerant crop. There are other more drought tolerant crops as well. Sunflowers is a good
Sunflowers and
example of
sorghum.
developing those aspects, and the whole renewable diesel thing may be good for sunflower business as well. And we're seeing that, but we're also seeing genetics improve for more drought tolerance as well. So that's going to evolve. One of the things, and I had a graduate student from an East Coast Ivy League school contact me a few years ago and say, I'm doing my thesis on how climate change is threatening food production here in the United States. I said, well, I've got the data for you, but you're not going to like it. And so I gave her the data, and she was thrilled with it. She was surprised by it, but very excited to see it. Where we are changing the climate in the Midwest, some of it's because of evolving climate, some of it's because we're creating a microclimate with the corn we produce. We are seeing the Corn Belt move to the north and to the west. We're seeing an enlarging growing season. We're seeing fewer droughts in the Midwest.
Yeah.
We are seeing more large rain events, including excessive rain events, but overall more rain. So we're seeing higher humidity. Our average temperature is trending higher, but that's not because of daytime highs. Daytime highs are actually trending a little bit lower.
Yeah,
it's nighttime lows. Yeah, because of the higher dew points. And so we're creating more of a greenhouse atmosphere across the Midwest.
Which, by the way, last I looked, crops grow really well in greenhouses because I've pointed out this whole fear about climate crisis. Everything that I have seen, and I've had, my buddy, the guy from Nutrien, on and talked about this very thing. And
Eric, probably.
Huh?
Eric
Snodgrass. Of course, Snodgrass. I can't remember. Yeah. See, I'm talking to you, and all I can think about is Arlan Suderman. But Snodgrass. Yeah. So Snodgrass on. Yeah. He says, "Well, where you are in Indiana is about a degree warmer, and you get a little bit more rain." I'm like, that sounds pretty good for crop production. Okay, I promise everybody we're going to look ahead. So the acres that we have are more than there were 40 years ago for corn and soy, and we grow the hell out of corn and soy, more than we ever have. Okay. Mm-hmm. Last year was down just a blip because it was dry in the West. But the point is it's still on a trend line is going up. And you think we're going to continue to find demand for that. So if that's the case, my question was, some of us are old enough and pay attention to economic history. Late 70s, really good. 80s, we all talk about how terrible it was in agriculture. Started in about late 90s, things got a little bit better, at least got more like I'd call it break even, mid to late 90s. 2006, 2005, 2006 to 2013. Holy bejesus. Party streamers. You know what? Let's tap the kegs. 2014 to 2018, things got a little soft. A lot of the young people, Arlan, said, oh gosh, these times are terrible. Like, no, these times are normal. Yeah. 2016, 2013, that was crazy. 2018, that was normal. 2015, that was normal. Here we go then. We get a bunch of federal money from 2019, 2020, 21, and 22. We've got amazing yields and amazing prices. 2023, things are going to be good. How long does this party last?
Yeah, I think we're going to be going into what you might call a more normal time over here in the next few years. Weather-wise, I think we're going to go into a period that's going to be more favorable for higher yields. So you would think we'll start to build supplies a little bit here. And so that may mean a lower prices than what we've been experiencing here over the last couple of years. So as we look at the next 3-4 years, maybe higher yields, maybe lower prices, but the higher yields, so offset the lower prices, so to speak, and more opportunities from the demand side there. That we already talked about. But I also think that means more volatility. So it means you're going to have to, I said, we'll always have opportunities. Some years we have to work for more. So I think we're going into a period the next few years where we have to work to take advantage of those opportunities more. We have to be more disciplined in our risk management programs. Not get greedy. Focus, is this price one that allows me to lock in a profitable margin on my acres? and protect the equity in my farm and maybe build it. I think that's what we're going to be looking at the next few years.
What about this year? Are there any surprise? All in all, you and I both think it's going to be good. You can set up good money. If you didn't get crazy and get too indebted, you're not going to be grabbing 8.5% operating loans this year anyhow. Are there any surprises this year that you and I aren't thinking about, or I'm not thinking about, and you are?
One of the things that I've been watching is we've had a lot of talk about bank contagion lately and what happened. So I was looking back because I remember the days of the high interest rates, and Paul Volcker pushed things to 22% interest rates back in 1980. And I'm not saying that we're going to go to 22%, but what followed after that in the 80s was we saw 32% of the savings and loans fail. We survived that, but it was a rough time. And I remember some dark days in agriculture because in the late 70s, banks were telling farmers, buy that piece of land you want, borrow 100% because it's going up in value. It's going to be worth more than you have borrowed. And interest rates were outrageous, as we said. And as soon as everything came to a halt, all of a sudden, everything turned over. And it was very dark.
People ask me, I say it was a function of about multiple things. We frankly had overproduced. We already are heading into a glut of stuff globally. And people think, well, did the Russian wheat crisis or the wheat embargo? I said, that's like blaming the Great Depression on, Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over the lantern or something like that. By the way, I just mixed history right there, dear listener. Yes, the Chicago fire was blamed on Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over the lantern. The Great Depression was something else completely. I'm sure it was the little guy from Monopoly landed on go to jail. Anyway, Arlan, so you think probably
I think we're going to have some more troubled times in our economy. And Scott Shellady said the other day, I don't think we're going to have a hard landing. I think we're going to have a long landing. And I think that makes a lot of sense, that we're looking at a long landing here before we get inflation under control and we get things better in balance, pay the price of 3 years of a lot of free money and zero interest rates. There's a price to be paid. I put in my commentary the other day, there are no free lunches. In the last 3 years, we've been having a feast. So we've got to pay the bill for that feast, and how well we manage through this is going to take some challenges. And that's going to have its impact on agriculture. And so, therefore, that's why I say it's a time to be focusing on equity, not getting greedy, having discipline and plan. We've been able to be good marketers the last couple of years by just waiting and doing nothing. And you can't afford to do that going forward. The opportunities will be there, but don't get greedy. Have a plan in place. Treat your farm like a business, and it'll pay dividends. You'll have those opportunities. It's time for good management.
Yeah, I'd say you're probably right. And I don't see a big surprise, but you're the one that's got your ear to the ground a lot more on this than I do. Can we extend this? You said normal times. Extended normal times are okay unless interest rates kill you. Isn't that the only risk?
Yeah, and part of this key is if we can avoid I don't expect a big problem with the banks that we had with the savings and loans. First of all, interest rates aren't as high. And second of all, we're more highly regulated and not seeing that much leverage in the loans like what we did then. But I do think there's going to be some more banks go down, and that's going to create some uneasiness and some concerns and some problems, et cetera. We will work our way through this. I think the next steps, the next challenges are going to be, we have some emerging nations have a lot of dollar-denominated debt that are going to have some credit problems. And then the next thing that's not been talked about yet really is what the interest obligations on our national debt is going to do. That is going up fast, and it's going to very rapidly reach what we spend on our national defense every year just to pay interest on our debt. That's going to change government policy. It's going to increase taxes. It is going to cause the Fed to eventually, I think, have to start going back to quantitative easing or monetizing our debt, if you will, printing money to buy our debt. And that is inflationary.
As I say, so you don't think there's going to be an end to inflation. So actually, when we think these prices are good, these prices are fine. It's just that everything we're paying for eats up all the good prices. His name's Arlan Suderman. Chief economist, chief commodities economist, StoneX. If you want to find him, how do they find you?
At stonex.com, or you can follow me on Twitter. My handle is Arlan, ARLANFF101.
I think I am after we saw each other, but I want to make sure I am. All right. Anyway, thanks for being here, my friend. I got to tell you, I think you and I could have a road show. Maybe we're going to charge a lot of money for it, though, especially with all this inflation you're talking about. You'll be the guy. You'll be the guy that has, his headphones on. I'll be the guy that just, keeps kicking you good topics. I think it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, well, it's hard to hear on the trading floor here if I don't have my headphones on, but it keeps my ears warm too. I'm getting kind of old.
Everybody says, "Hey, Damian, you seem like you're funnier than Arlan." I have to be because I'm not as smart. You see how that works? It's kind of like you've always got to develop whatever thing you have. So anyway, he's a good dude. His name's Arlan Suderman, and he's with StoneX. Thanks for being here, my friend. This is really good. Great information. I love it. I can talk about numbers and all this kind of stuff a lot. I enjoyed it. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Damian.
Till next time. I'm Damian Mason, and this is The Business of Agriculture. Hey, thanks for being here. This episode of The Business of Agriculture was brought to you by Pattern Ag. You've heard me talk about Pattern Ag because I think it's a pretty cool concept. New technology that allows you to predict the problems you're going to have and therefore treat them before those problems cost you money. What kind of problems am I talking about? Pests and disease. Things like cordon rootworm, sudden death syndrome, cyst nematode, and a whole bunch of other bad things that happen out there in the field that can cost you money. Guess what? Pattern Ag will let you find out ahead of time if the disease or the pest pressure is there, and therefore you're treating it before it costs you any money. What a great concept. Go to pattern.ag, that's www.pattern.ag, to learn more about their product, their technology, how it can make you money, save you yield, and also where you can find a rep that can come out there and do the work for you. Pattern.ag.